I'm walking down the street, and from behind me, I hear Gedalia, I hear Mr. Gerfine, I hear, hey, you, I hear Mr., I hear Sir, right? So all these are different names calling me. I hear Dad, I hear Grandpa, right? They're all, or I hear Honey, they're all calling the same person, but depending on the name that I hear will affect the way I will turn around and answer. If I hear Honey, I know it's my wife. If I hear Dad, if I know, right? If I hear Sir, if I hear Mr. Gerfine as opposed to Gedalia. So it's not that I'm a different person, but the name will create my response. So God faculty and facilitates expression in the world through these various names. Not that it's different gods, but by using a different name is going into a different jurisdiction, if you will, of godliness in the world. So the name which has jurisdiction over nature, as you know, I don't say the names of God, so I will distort the name, is pronounced Elohim. And Elohim, in its numerical value, equals the word in Hebrew for nature, ha-teva. So the name Elohim, which is God's name, is the same numerical value as the word for nature because it's the name that facilitates the natural nature of this world. The fact that the sun comes up and then the moon comes up, the fact that the moon affects the tides, the fact that trees live through xylem and phloem and human beings live with respiratory systems, vakula, science, chemistry, all of that world is under that name of Elohim, which is the word for the natural order. However, there's another aspect of the name of Elohim, which is called Elohim Chaim, the living God. Now, living God doesn't mean as opposed to the dead God, right? That would be insane. You know, I try to be very respectful of all peoples, all cultures, all religions in the world. However, I am from New York, so sometimes I'm not always good at it. But if you think about it, there is another religion that talks about the idea of God having been killed, which is mind-boggling. If you just were to think about that for a few minutes, it would come up like, does not compute. Anyhow, so there's a term called Elohim Chaim, living God. And again, it doesn't mean that there's a dead God. Rather, it means that you, the human being, are living, connected to God. Meaning as follows. I have a whole class here on dreams, but I think this is important because obviously some little angel pushed my mouth to go off in this direction. So we'll just go, we'll go with the flow.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay. In this world, everything in this world is finite. Excuse me. It has a beginning, it has an end. And because it's finite, it has a limit. That limit is referred to by the Hebrew word din. Din means judgment. Now, judgment doesn't just merely mean somebody sitting up at the table with a little kink, tink, you know, I pronounce that. That is an aspect of, that's what judges do in courts. But the word judgment means measurement. I can tell you exactly how long this pen is. I can open up the pen and see how much ink it is. I can understand how the cap, and then, right? All of this is, it's judgment, it's definition. And it's true, it's din because it can't be more, it can't be less, it has to be this in order to be this. So judgment is constriction. Constriction means that, like in the cartoons, You know, you have the little guy running on the cliff and suddenly he runs off the cliff. Now in real life, if you run off the cliff, whoop, you die. In the cartoon, he runs off the cliff and realizes it and quickly runs back on.
Mm-hmm.
So in the real world, this is judgment. This is the way it is. You go over here, you go down. There's no such thing as running out here.
Mm-hmm.
In the spiritual world, you can run over here because this area is called God's grace or kindness. That even though the person should go down, God's, so to speak, suspends the person here, giving them a chance to atone or to rectify and get back on solid ground where they are deserving in a good way of what they get. But in the lower world, in this physical world, therefore, everything can be, it has pain, it has struggle. It's all about constriction. This is hinted at in the Hebrew word for the land of Egypt. Mitzrayim is Egypt. Egypt, Mitzrayim, comes from the word tsar. Tsar, mitzarim. Tsar is the root. As the root, it means constricted. And therefore, everything in the physical world is constricted. However, if a person can take any item of the physical world and, again, metaphorically speaking, reattach it to God, then they have created a portal. Through that portal, now it removes the negative judgments because it opens up the restrictions. And that's why that relationship through nature, not avoiding nature, but going into nature. For example, in the Jewish calendar, the holiest day of the year is Shabbat. Shabbat is even holier than the Day of Atonement, which we call Yom Kippur. Why? Because on Yom Kippur, we're like angels. We don't eat, we don't drink, we don't make love, we don't do anything that people / animals do in the physical world. We're like angels. But that's lower than being human. Human is greater than being an angel, because to be human means that you can, on Shabbat, you specifically eat more meals than you might eat during the regular week. You are commanded to make love to your husband or your wife. You are commanded to have extraordinary, delicious meals. Why? Because by submerging into the physical and inoculating it with spiritual, you actually reconnect it to its source, which is God, and you make it holy. So holiness is not about removing yourself from the physical world, fasting or whatever. It's going into the physical world and finding God there. That's something an angel cannot do. An angel does not have a temptation to steal. So if an angel does not steal, big deal. But people have a desire to steal. So if a person overcomes that desire to steal because they realize that God is everywhere, 24/7, everywhere. There are no timeout TV commercials with God. It's all the time. And when a person realizes it, the whole world becomes like a dollhouse. There are no more roofs that you can hide under. It's just all the roofs are gone and God is in every room watching everything all the time. How could you steal? So, right, same idea. How can you desire another person's property, right? I knew a woman, it's a long story ago, a very, very successful banker in Wall Street. I mean, big time banker in Wall Street. And she was growing and growing and growing in her career. And one year, her dad bought her like the most expensive Porsche sports car for her birthday. And she came out of her house and there was a big red bow on the roof and a big red ribbon. She was so excited, and she cut the ribbon and she jumped into the car and she broke down crying because suddenly she realized how empty all of this is. She reached her goal, this beautiful car, maybe it was one of her dreams, and now she's in it. Big deal. So what? So what? So it's a Lamborghini, so it's a jalopy, so it's a Ford, so it's a Rolls Royce. So what? And therefore, when she suddenly saw how shallow, how empty, because a person wears the name of a designer on their shirt, that makes them a more important person? Hardly. It just makes them less of a person. So therefore, instead of just seeing things in the physical world of what other people owe, person realizes, whoa, there's a different thing happening here. Every human being is here for his or her own job. And God has created the perfect TV show, and you're the star of the show. And every person you're going to see in your lifetime, every event you're going to go through, whether or not you're a poor person or a rich person. By the way, in the Bible, it does not say anywhere, thou shalt not be poor. Being poor is not a sin. It does say, thou shalt not be a jerk. So therefore, a person's personality or the way that somebody who, God forbid, makes money and feels that therefore they're more important than another person are in for a horrible surprise when they go to the next world, because that's not what it's about. So whether or not a person's rich or whether or not a person's poor, it's a question of whether or not a person is a person. And at that moment, their rich is a tool and their poor is a tool. King Solomon said, God, don't make me so poor that I will have to go against your law and steal, and don't make me so rich that I'll feel arrogant that I don't need God. So all of these are just the challenges. Once we realize that, then when we see somebody else succeeding, we don't have jealousy, because we realize those are the tools that that person needs. And if anything, instead of being jealous of the other person, we can be happy for them because they're succeeding in whatever their dreams are, hopefully in a good and well-balanced way. So this is part, one of the great commentators, the Malbim, explains on the 10 Commandments when it says, do not covet your, lo sachmud, do not be jealous of your friend. He says, imagine in a forest, you have giraffes, you have lions, you have rhinoceroses. They eat different foods. They have different lifestyles. A rhinoceros is not jealous of a lion. A lion is not jealous of a giraffe. Each one is what it is. So if you look at your friend, instead of seeing them like a person you're competing against, you can see them like they're a giraffe and you're a lion, two different species, each one getting from God what it needs. Otherwise, you can get lost in this world. So the challenge is, instead of getting lost in the world, to penetrate the world and to be able to find inside of it holiness, that which represents the furthest from holiness. Here comes the segue into our class about dreams, is the stone, the rock. Jacob goes to sleep and there are 12 different rocks around his head. And when he wakes up in the morning, all of the rocks have become one rock. And he actually takes that rock and he stands it up as a monument. And our sages tell us, where was this happening? On the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Now, that's very interesting. These 12 rocks, somehow defying the laws of physics, all morph into one rock, and that becomes the pillar at the Temple Mount. What is the Temple Mount? So according to our tradition, if you take a pen and you draw a circle and you show it to your friend. Now, I'm going to just imagine you're a good artist, so you drew a really accurate circle. And you show the circle to your friend and you say to him or her, where is the beginning of the circle? your friend will have no idea. How could you tell unless you were there when the circle was being made? Where is the beginning and where is the end? However, even if you don't know, you do know that the beginning is right next to the end, because the last point ends right next to the first point. This is taught in our Friday night prayer text. I'll say in Hebrew first. Sof Maaseh Machshava Tchila. The last action is the first thought. Now, let's do that on a simple level. I decide I want to go to the kitchen and get a cookie. That's my first thought. Now what I have to do? I have to get out of my chair. I got to walk out of this room. I got to go over to the kitchen. I've got to open up the cookie jar. I've got to take a cookie, and now I've got it. So the last thing I am doing, taking the cookie, was the first thing I thought about. On a bigger scale, when God created the world, the point of inception is the Temple Mount. That's why the earth that was gathered to create the first human beings from which we all come from was taken at the Temple Mount. That's why it was the same place that Jacob had the dream of the ladder. And that dream of the ladder was the story associated with these 12 stones. That was the dream he had that night. So what happened in that dream? He sees in that dream a ladder that goes to heaven. It comes to teach him how to be a human being, not an angel. The angels are going up and down the ladder. Very nice. But what's that got to do with me? Me, as a human, I have to learn 3 lessons. Lesson number 1, I must have my feet on the ground. No matter how spiritual, no matter how much I learn Kabbalah, no matter how much whatever, it does not negate feet on the ground. What is feet on the ground? God is not impressed with our wisdom. God is not impressed. Whoa, did you just hear what that human being said? Doesn't go like that. I mean, you could have the most unbelievable Kabbalistic mind and know how to create cows by just saying God's name and so on. Big deal. Big deal. Okay, it's cool. Everyone around you can go, wow, but not God. What impresses God? That you gave money to a person in the street who's hungry. That you gave clothes to people who can't afford clothes. That is an act of God. And that is something angels cannot do. But human angels, people with evolved consciousness and aware that every human being is made by God, can do that. They can do that. And it's real easy. So that's feet on the ground, rule number 1. Rule number 2, as you climb a ladder, you have to go rung by rung by rung by rung by rung, because if you try to go too fast, too quick, and you miss, you don't go back to where you are, you go boom, all the way down. So therefore, a humble person will be able to grow in wisdom properly. This is why the Torah defines Moses as the most humble of all people, because his humility was based on the fact that he realized that the more you learn, the more you realize how nothing you know. And then the third lesson is never believe something is impossible. It may be improbable. It may be difficult, but never believe it's impossible, because nothing is impossible. And the world you live in today, when all of the great thinkers came along and all of the naysayers made fun of them, they said if man were to fly, he would have wings. Okay? What's happened in the last 150 years with our wings? You know, if man was made to live to the old age of 70 or 80, well, look at the amazing world we live in today. People living to 90 with brilliant minds, and so on and so on and so on. because a person can understand that nothing is impossible. The ladder can go to heaven. That was his dream. And what happens when you go up to these higher levels? So the higher levels bring greater energy and blessing to the lower level. So much so that the result of that dream of the impossible ladder resulted in a physical impossibility. And if you don't think it's impossible, after the class, go take 12 stones and see if you could push them together into one. And text me when you finish, okay? So how did that happen? Because by going very high, Yaakov was able to go very deep at the same time. And he realized that the word in Hebrew for stone, Evan, is Aleph, Bet, Nun. Aleph, Bet is the word, first of all, for father, Av. Again, reference to God. God is power as Elohim over everything, even the rock. That's why this is a coming attraction, like they do in the movies or the TV, to the next episode next week of reincarnation. A person can be reincarnated even as a rock, right? So I think there was a Rolling Stone like that, or maybe it was Simon and Garfunkel in the rock. I don't know, forget it. I have to do my rock and roll homework and try to come up with it. Anyhow, but the point is that even something to seemingly have zero spirituality is infused with godliness of Av, of father. Plus, Aleph Bet is a reference to the 22 letters that God uses in creation. So the Aleph Bet, the stones, are just part of creation. And when a person realizes that, they then break into the 50th gate of wisdom, which is the infinite, and that's the last letter of the stone. This is why Moses was punished for hitting the stone, because by talking to the stone and showing that you could bring water out of the stone, would show that there's godliness even in the stone, although it's still pretty amazing. Go try hit a rock until water comes out. Good luck. But it's even more amazing if you could just talk to it and water comes out. So therefore, Yaakov was able to pull together all of the different elements of the most physical, non-spiritual, unify them into one, and erect it on the very platform from where man was created, where Adam's and Eve's earth was amassed to create life. That's the amazing power here that's going on. This ability to be able to do that. And when you do that, then you connect to the Elohim of nature, Chaim, the living God. And that gives you a whole different realm and a whole different perspective of what you can accomplish in your time here on the planet. So having said that, let's come back now more specifically into the world of dreams. As you know, I hope, from our other classes, we know, and I'll just say this briefly in case you're new to the class or in case you fell asleep during that part of the class or whatever. I used to call it the hollow coconut theory. The hollow coconut theory is when you have a teacher and he or she suddenly hears the sound of a coconut landing, and you realize it's actually the head of some student who just went that, like the ding. So it's okay. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says it's better to sleep in a class than to be awake not in a class. Because if you're asleep in the class, there are higher parts of your soul that are still getting it. Don't worry about it. But if you're not in the class, there ain't no way to be able to receive what's being transmitted. So anyhow, so in this idea of the dream, this idea, therefore, what I wanted to share with you is that words in Hebrew are not words. They are entities which are simultaneously mathematical algorithms, and at the same time, words. Left brain, right brain. Letters, words, poetry, music, math, numbers, science, equations. Together, they make up the brain. Left brain, right brain. So watch. I don't know how to do this in Chinese. If I did, it'd be really cool. And fortunately, English letters are a lot easier to do this than in Chinese. So I'm going to do this in English letters. So take, for example, here, this is again, it's, you got to use a little imagination. But let's say this is the English letter E, right? I mean, to do a Chinese letter, I probably have to do something like that. Yes, this is the letter. It's way too complicated. So let's just work with this. So here's the letter E, right? However, if I take the letter E and I move it this way, it's now the number 3. If I move it this way, it's suddenly W. If I move it this way, it's now an M. So it's all the same thing. It's just a question of how you are relating to it. So it's not that the Hebrew letter Aleph is ascribed a numerical value of 1. It's that form is how you write 1. And it also happens to be how you write Aleph. It's both at the same time. It's the nucleus, right? It's like in the center of the atom. It's both components, right brain, left brain. So therefore, the world simultaneously is science and it's art. It's really what it's all about. I mean, you could digitize music, right? And you can, on the other hand, put poetry into science. That's the merging of the two elements. If you understand that, then when you look at a Hebrew word, you are also looking at a numerical value. And once you understand the numerical value, then when you look at a sentence, you're also looking at an algorithm. We'll hold it at that point. So now, therefore, when I understand the elements that are in the word, it's teaching me the functionality or the feng shui, how that energy works in that word. So let's take a look at the word dream, chalom. And it's very similar to the word halon. I'll spell them in Hebrew. The word dream in Hebrew is 4 letters. It's chet, lamed, vav, and mem sofit, a final mem. The word for dream is the same first 3 letters, chet, lamed, vav, but it's a nun sofit. It's a final nun. And if that's confusing, good, it should be, because we're going to have to explain it. And you will understand the chemistry, spiritual chemistry, as to how a dream works. But the first thing I want to point out is you notice that, again, the word for window and the word for dream are almost the same. The only difference is that the last letter is 1 letter apart. The word for window is 1 more letter, and it's our nun, just like we had that nun in the word for stone, Evan. And we know that the nun is 50, which always, as I said before, a reference to access to the infinite. So therefore, a window is a clear vision into another dimension. When you look out your window, you're looking from one domain into another domain, maybe private domain to a public domain, doesn't matter. It's a vision into another, in Hebrew we would call shetach, into another realm. So that's why prophecy works more on the level of windows, because they have clearer vision. The dream is rougher. It's not as clear as looking through a window. That's why it stops 1 short, but we're going to analyze this deeper in a minute. And therefore the dream, unlike the window, you can say what you see, and that's what it is. We said this before in our earlier classes about dreams. What you see might be the opposite of what it is. because the dream's reality will be focused or dependent upon interpretation, which is not the case of looking out the window. Okay, how does it work? So the first letter is the letter Chet, which is the number 8. And the number 8, like the number 50, but in a different way, is also transcending nature. This is why we have the 8 days of Hanukkah. This is why we perform the circumcision on the 8th day, because the 8th day is a day which needs no vessel. Mondays need Monday vessels for Mondays to be poured into them. You can't pour Mondays into a Wednesday vessel. You have to pour Mondays into Mondays, and then you pour Tuesdays into Tuesdays, and then you can pour Wednesdays into Wednesdays. But the 8th day you can pour into any day, because it's beyond the 7-day block. That's why if you ever look at it, it's kind of curious. If you take the number 8, you put it on its side, it's the infinity symbol. So because it's infinity, but it's within this world, although it's above this world, maybe I should say it's of this world, but not from this world, the 8th day can be accessed anywhere. Therefore, the circumcision of the 8th day can happen on any day of the week, and it connects the child to the accessibility of the infinite in this world. How does a person, what do you do with that? Right? There's an expression in Yiddish, which obviously I won't say in Yiddish, but I'll just say in English. It's like, what do I eat it with? A fork or a spoon? Or chopsticks? I must tell you, my first trip to China, when I was with my friends in Shanghai, in Pudong, I got compliments that white Jew boy from Israel was able to use chopsticks perfectly. So then I had to explain to him that all of us white Jew boys in America, we all grew up on Chinese food. So we love Chinese food, which then we find out you don't even have it in China. But nonetheless, we thought it was Chinese food. And at least we all learned how to use chopsticks. So, but you don't know what to eat it with. Do I eat it with chopsticks? Do I use a spoon? Do I use a fork? It's like, you don't know what to do with it. So very nice. 8 is access to the infinite. Whoopie-doo. What do I do now? Next letter, Lamed. Lamed is a phenomenal letter. Lamed is, in the way that the Hebrew letters, biblically that is, are written, the Lamed is one of the, if not only, certainly one of the only letters which is written different than any other letter. All other Hebrew letters, unless of course there are 2 parts, that's something else, but when it's one part, are written with one stroke. Actually, I remember learning this now, it just came back to me when I was in, I don't remember, one of the wonderful museums, and I don't remember now which city in China it was. Somebody was showing me in Chinese painting, a certain stroke always was used as anger, and a different type of a stroke was always used in peace or joy. And unfortunately, I don't remember more than that now, I apologize. But the same idea, in the writing of the Hebrew letters, the letter has to be done in one movement. You cannot lift the pen off the page, except the Lamed. Now, watch how the Lamed is drawn. It's phenomenal. Well, let's talk about the Lamed. Again, not modern Hebrew script, biblical script. The Lamed has a line sideways. It has a top and has a bottom. The top is over here, and the bottom is connected over here. The bottom curves up to the middle, and the other side is a straight line that comes down. So you have the straight line coming down, then you have a horizontal line, and then it continues here as a curve. Oh, and how is it drawn? Watch this. It starts from the very bottom of the letter. It goes up in the curve to what will be the end of this horizontal line, which hasn't been drawn yet. And then it goes across to the horizontal line. And then normally you would have thought it then goes up, but no, it stops and the pen goes up and then the straight line comes down. Why? What's that all about? So the answer is that this Hebrew letter, Lamed, is actually two words, because in Hebrew, vowels are not part of the words. There are no vowels. They're the nikudot. They're the little markings that tell you how to pronounce them. But the Hebrew alphabet is only consonants, no vowels. So according to how you take this word, Lamed Mem Dalid, which is how you write the letter Lamed. Like if you wanted to write the letter Lamed, you'd write Lamed Mem Dalid, which is Lamed. It means two words. It means to teach and to learn. Same word, to teach and to learn. The only difference is the vowels. We're not going to go down that path right now, but that's the only difference. So there's a tremendous lesson here in the learning process. You have to make the effort. You got to take the first step. You have to stir from below in order to receive from above. So therefore, the letter of begins with the learning. I, meaning the dot down here on earth, I'm going to now try to access heaven, meaning wisdom. It's not going to go straight. When in your life did you ever set out to do something and it went exactly like you planned? Never. You set out to do this, suddenly this happens, then that happens, and if in a miracle you might actually succeed. I mean, even my whole life, I've been like 30 years in a high-tech world. I gotta tell you, 99% of the high-tech world, you go to the inventors, they had one idea, and as they're going this way, boom, something comes along and takes it that way. Scientists are busy doing this, and I don't know, just throw that. But that little thing they're about to throw away, it turns out to be the most, it's how it works. It never goes straight up to heaven. You get up, but it's a curve. In fact, we use that term in English, a learning curve. So you go through this learning curve. And when you get to a certain plateau, when you've made your effort, heaven responds. In heaven, that's why the pen now jumps to the top. It comes straight down. So everything coming down from heaven comes down as a blessing. That line represents the difference between heaven and earth. Heaven comes straight down as a blessing. But how we receive that teaching from above depends on how evolved we are as holy vessels. So the more that we have attached to living God, the more that process becomes smooth. And ultimately, you convert the Lamed experience into the next letter, the Vav, which is like a pipe. It comes straight down, or like a rod, like Moses is held. And that pipe brings things straight down. So when you become straight, in Hebrew called Yashar, you become straight with God, Yashar Kel, which is the name Israel. When you become that Vav, then you are opening all of the judgments, the constrictions, and bringing the blessing into this world. That is this process of removing the veils of what you see in nature and understanding, not getting away from nature, but the holiness that's in nature. And by doing that process, this is how you open the heavens. Now, once that's open, how do you receive that vision? Well, if you're a prophet, then you've hit the nun, and it becomes chalon, a window. But if you're not, like the rest of us, it's only a chalom, like a dream. Now the mem, which is the last letter of dream, is the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And because of that, it represents the idea of center. And center is all about balance. And therefore, when a person finds equilibrium, when a person finds balance, That's what allows the flow to come down. So now the images that are being sent to you are clear images, right? I'll give you an example. Hopefully you're old enough to remember something called a radio. So if you have to just tell you a funny thing. When I was a little kid, one of my childhood memories was driving from Long Island into New York City, and my parents threw me like in the back seat. So I'm lying there in the dark back seat, just watching like the street lights go whoo, 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 whoo. That's the lighting coming in. And they had on the radio in the car classical music. But when you went into the tunnel, like the Midtown Tunnel or the Lincoln Tunnel to get into Manhattan, there wasn't good reception. So you were still hearing the music, but you hear. Well, I got so used to that I still listen to classical music on the radio. But if there's not a little in it, I don't really enjoy the classical music. That's why I don't go to classical concerts, because when it's live, there's no. It just became kind of the way I heard classical music. But there is not coming from the musicians. It's coming from the radio's inability to receive the signal clearly. So the nature of the dream, the transmission from heaven, is valuable and it's meaningful and it's beyond any idea of how rich it is. But in our heads, we have the like a broken radio trying to figure out what is this message that's coming in. That's our challenge, is to be able to understand what is this message. So it comes in the form of a dream as opposed to a form of a prophecy. That's part of the struggle that we go to be able to really receive. Now, watch this. We're going to spend this on the next 15 minutes because we've spoken a lot about interpretations and things like that. And I know that you all know this story because I just know you guys are like super scholars and drill down, get anything, dots like freaking out across people's Talmud and so on. I have to like shovel more information out so that it won't expire. And that's why I'm working now on people's Zohar, but I'm not sure how soon that'll be ready. But anyhow, here is one of the epic stories in the Bible, which we're going to analyze based on the Gemara about dreams. And it has to do when Joseph is still in prison and the minister of drinks and the minister of baking are both in prison and they both have dreams. And Joseph interprets the drink ministers as a wonderful news. And the other poor jerk says, "Whoa, how about my dream?" And it's a horrible, horrible dream. Joseph just basically kills the guy. But let's go to the good news and let's watch what it says here. So I'm going to just use Rabbi Arthur Scroll, also known as Art Scroll, just because it'll save time and read here from the English. So Joseph wakes up to the two guys in the morning and he sees that they're really kind of something's bothering them. And he says to them, he says, why are you so bummed out? Obviously, it doesn't say bummed out. I'm just putting in my own words. And they said, well, we had a dream and nobody can interpret it for us. And Joseph says, are not the interpretations of dreams from God? Tell me them if you want. So the one who was in charge of holding the cups, he says the dream to Joseph as follows. In my dream, there was a grapevine in front of me. And on the grapevine, there were 3 clusters. And it was as they were budding, as they were blossoming, the clusters became big, full clusters of grapes. And then I took the cup in my hand and I took the grapes and I pressed them, meaning I made them into wine, and I put the cup into the hand of Pharaoh. That's just the literal reading. Probably a bad job, but that's what we got. Now, Joseph interprets the dream. And he says, the 3 strands that you saw, this represents 3 days. And another 3 days, Paro will lift up your head, meaning give you good spirit, and bring you back to your post, and you will again put the cup of wine into Paro's hands as you did in the past. So Yosef gives the interpretation. He doesn't go into any of the details other than to reference the 3 strings as being a reference to 3 days. However, and this is what's really important, is even though a dream can or depends upon its interpretation, a dream can be reinterpreted. A dream is like something which is a turning diamond, and every time you turn it, another color comes out. If you've ever held a diamond, if you look at it one way, you see green, you look at it this way, you see red, you look at it this way, you see purple, blue, for example, right? So you see all these different colors, but it's the same diamond. So it's the same idea. The dream is like a magical diamond. And according to the way people are interpreting it, it moves into different ways. So it's not a stagnant thing. It's not, there was the dream, Joseph interpreted it, game over. No, the dream continues to live even to this day, as we'll see in one more minute. Therefore, sometimes in our dreams, we talked in our first class of dreams of 3 different types of dreams in terms of what part of the night the dream is received in. But there are another 3 types of dreams. One are dreams that absolutely just mean nothing. Another one is a dream that's told to you by an angel. And a third one is a dream that's told to you by a demon. But the problem is, you don't get authorship. You know, when you open up a book, it says who wrote it. But when you open up a dream, it doesn't tell you which one of the 3 were the author of that dream. So you have to figure it out. Was it from an angel? Was it from a demon? Not only that, it goes a step forward. The Gemara says in the name of Shmuel, one of the great Amoraim of the Talmud, if he had a good dream, he would say about that dream a quote from the Bible, which says that dreams follow their meanings, and therefore, like we just read now, therefore he would give it good meaning. And if he had a bad dream, he would also quote the Bible, and he would say the quote that says dreams are meaningless. So it's not just so much even the way that you have the dream, but another important component in the dream is how do you feel about the dream? If the dream doesn't bother you, then you don't even need to deal with it. And bother doesn't mean in a negative way. Bother can also mean in the sense that it engages you. But if it engages you sometimes in a really negative way, sometimes people wake up in the morning and they fast. They don't eat that day. So that the fast should serve as a form of atonement for whatever that negativity was in the dream. And other times the dreams may really be 100% true, but they're not going to necessarily happen tomorrow. They might happen years from them. For example, Joseph's dreams when he was a child, when he was 17 years old. He had these dreams of tremendous grandeur, but it didn't happen until he was 30. So it happened many years later. And sometimes the dreams, and here comes another coming attraction to next week's class, don't even happen in this incarnation. They don't happen in this lifetime. They'll happen in another lifetime, because dreams are not limited to our little linear sense of time. They are on another level of time, which has nothing to do with our little sense of calendar time. So maybe they'll happen in another incarnation. So all of this is really putting the power in your hands, in your control, how you wish to live with it. So now, therefore, if these dreams live on, the Gemara actually says that the dream of Joseph had 5 primary components. There was the grapevine, there were the 3 branches, there was the blossoming, there was the appearing of fruit, and there was also at the same time, there was the clusters that came about, the big grape clusters. And each one of these 5 things begin and are given to numerous interpretations in the Talmud. And as you know, the Talmud spans hundreds of years. So there were different rabbis who were coming and reinterpreting. Now, reinterpreting doesn't mean they were negating the previous interpretation. It means like the diamond, they were just turning it now and different light was coming out. So for example, Rava, who is one of the later days Amoraim, he says that when he refers to this idea of the 3 cups of wine that were made from the 3 branches, we know from King David says, when, again, loose translation, when evil comes upon me, I lift up the cup of wine to God. Now, what is the idea of a cup of wine? So first of all, the only way you make wine is you crush the grape. So there's something destructive that happens. There's hardships. There's nanjing. There are horrible times where people are crushed. However, if you are part of an eternal people, then that will create wine that will allow you to be able to elevate it, symbolized by the raising of the cup. But still, the wine in its color looks like blood. That's why on Passover, we use the 4 cups of wine, reminding us of the horrible tragedies that happened in slavery in Egypt. But the idea of lifting up the cup, again, back to what we began our class with, which name of God do we lift it to? We lift it to the name of Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is above the name of Elohim. It's the name that rules over heaven. If we are able to see the suffering in our life and attach it to understanding, even if it's beyond our mental capability, to know that there's a divine plan and everything is happening for a reason, then there's no longer any need for the suffering. It can beat the suffering. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid and I had to go to the doctor, I'm sure the doctor still does it today. If they want to push your tongue down, they have this like flat stick and they shove it into your and they push down your tongue and you're gagging to death while he's looking in there with a light. I hated that like I can't tell you. I hated it so much that I actually learned how to push my tongue down. So as he's coming in with the stick, oh, I don't need the stick, I can see fine. Because I so hated the idea of that stick coming down my throat. So it's the same idea. God doesn't do anything, Khalila, God forbid, to just hurt us. It's only because we put ourselves into such a cramped, narrow space, something's got to break to get us out, right? A person can have a ski accident and break their leg, and the doctor has to break it another time to put it back in place. But if you don't need to do that, if you've learned how to take the suffering and raise the cup back to God, you can stop evil just by the mere movement of your hand with a cup. And that's why Rava says that these 3 cups are actually a reference to the 3 times where evil was paid back. The first time was Moses coming up against Pharaoh. The second time was when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon or Iraq conquered Egypt. And the third time, the final cup, is when the Messiah comes and he lifts the cup. Then that's really major payback for all the evil that was in the world. But as far as our ideas of the dreams go, that's what it means. So you could have had a dream years ago, remember it, and reinterpret it again into a new aspect of your life, because the dreams never die, because dreams are light. You have Torah or and Ner mitzvah, the light of Torah and the flame of the candle. Now, the flame of the candle only burns as long as there's a candle, but light doesn't need a candle, it's infinite. And so since the dreams come through the channels of light, they are eternal. So therefore, a person with greater wisdom and more maturity at a later point in their life can come back and revisit dreams, or sometimes even have the same dream again later in life. And now it's not locked, it's open, Now they're able to see it with a new interpretation to hopefully elevate that power that's innate in that dream to a better place. So, as they say in Chinese, mucho gracias for your.
What is it?
No, that was Spanish, actually. Mucho gracias is thank you very much in Spanish. You know, us stupid Americans, gracias. Our stupid Americans, we don't really learn languages. So we have like one little area here called foreign languages. So if you put too many different languages in here, it gets all confused. It doesn't, you know, you just hit the foreign language button and you're not sure which one of them will come out. So anyhow, thank you. It's wonderful to be in touch and to see you all again. And
Thank you.
we will figure out for the next class, because I promised Dot that we will happily do a class about reincarnation, which is a very nice next step after 3 classes about dreams.
Okay, how many classes will be under the topic of reincarnation?
Well, let's say 2, and then maybe
Okay.
we'll be surprised with a 3rd rather than say 3rd, and then I'm freaking out to get more information because I only had enough for 2.
Okay. Okay, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I always look forward to seeing you guys. It's really wonderful. And really lots of blessing to one of my favorite places in the world. Hopefully when Corona will get over, I'll be able to come out and visit again. Yeah,
Back.
don't have to
Okay,
ask twice.
thank you.
All right, bye everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.